Caught my pregnant sister-in-law hiding wine while freeloaded at my house. Now she and my brother demand an apology. Well, folks, I stumbled onto something wild the other day. I caught my sister-in-law, who's supposed to be pregnant, stashing wine bottles in her bag while she was crashing at my house rent-free after her split from her husband. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told her to pack up and leave. Now, my wife's brother and her mother are breathing down my neck, insisting I say sorry or they'll push for a divorce. Me, I'm 28 years old, been hitched for 3 years, and my wife, who's 34, and I have been together for 6 years, counting the time we were just dating. Her folks have always treated me decent, and our life together has had its good days and bad, but nothing too crazy. Last year, my wife's sister, Nancy, who's 30, tied the knot with her boyfriend. But not long after, just a few months in, she figured out he was messing around with someone from his job. She walked in on them right in their own home and was ready to walk out for good, but he talked her into sticking around. They tried working it out with a bunch of marriage counseling meetings, and I reckoned they were getting back on track. Then, about 3 months back, we learned they were calling it quits. Seems like, despite all that counseling, her husband started cheating again. This time, she wasn't having it, so she walked away and started the divorce process. It's been tough on her family, especially since, just a week after filing, Nancy found out she was expecting a baby. That threw a whole new wrench in things, and now, on top of the divorce, she's stuck dealing with a custody fight she never saw coming. She was maybe 2 or 3 months along, but you couldn't tell by looking at her yet. She's clearly down in the dumps about it all, and I feel for her, I really do, but I can't step in and fight her wars for her. About a week ago, she came to me asking if she could move in because living alone in her old place was too much since her husband left, and she had no one to chat with. She also mentioned the rent was way too steep for her to handle by herself, so she needed a spot to stay for a couple of months. I wasn't too keen on the idea for a couple of reasons. First off, our apartment's already a mess. My wife and I just settled in here a couple of weeks ago, and we haven't even unpacked everything yet. Adding someone else didn't seem smart. Second, and this is personal, Nancy's a real mess. She's got terrible hygiene, leaves stuff scattered everywhere, and expects others to pick up after her. I like things tidy, and that kind of chaos just rubs me the wrong way and gets under my skin. I stayed with her for a couple of weeks back when I first started dating my wife because my own place was getting treated for mold, and my wife was living with roommates then, so she set it up for me to crash at Nancy's for a few days. My parents live too far away, and so do my wife's, so Nancy was my only choice. Man, was she a slob. Clothes tossed all over the house, dirty dishes piled in the sink for days because she couldn't be bothered, and she barely touched the bathroom cleaning. Worst of all, she acted like I should be fine with that mess. I was pretty grossed out, but I kept quiet since she let me stay, and if I'd had the cash back then, I'd have checked into a hotel instead. It's been years since, and I figured she might have cleaned up her act by now. I talked it over with my wife when Nancy asked to move in, and my wife said she'd like me to say yes. She explained that her job has her traveling a lot, so she's only home on weekends, leaving me here full-time. My wife felt bad for her sister, what with the rough divorce and the pregnancy news on top of it. It sounded reasonable, and I'm not a cold-hearted guy, so I agreed to let Nancy stay until the divorce wraps up. That was a big step for me because having her here meant twice the housework, since I couldn't ask a pregnant woman to haul heavy stuff around the house. I figured she could handle little tasks, like folding clothes after laundry or something light, but nothing tough. Still, I let her move in, hoping she'd be more mindful of how she lived since it was my place, but nope, she was still the same sloppy person I remembered. Instead of pitching in, she made my workload even heavier. She claimed she was too tired to lift a finger around the house. I've never been pregnant, so I don't know what it's like, but I can't believe anyone's too worn out to fold laundry or at least put dirty dishes in the kitchen instead of leaving them scattered for me to find. She was always snacking, and every time she ate, she'd use a plate and just leave it lying around like some weird treasure hunt. It drove me nuts, and I hated cleaning up her messes, washing her clothes, and cooking for her while she just sat there watching television all day. She wasn't even working, and when I asked why, she said she'd already started her maternity leave. That didn't add up, though, since she wasn't showing any signs of pregnancy yet, and that's when I started getting a funny feeling about it. I did some figuring on my own and guessed that if she'd been pregnant as long as she said, she'd be around 4 months and into her second trimester. You'd expect a little bump by then, but there wasn't one. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, knowing some women don't show for a while, but then I noticed she hadn't seen a doctor since moving in, and it had been a few weeks. I'm not proud of it, and I had no proof back then, but I started thinking she might be pulling the wool over my eyes. She didn't look pregnant, and something in my gut told me she was faking it to get a break from us. Plus, she never brought up the custody fight, which would have been a big deal if her husband knew about the baby. All that together made me suspect she wasn't telling the truth, so a couple of days ago, I decided to check her things to get to the bottom of it. I knew her schedule, and she always took a nap at the same time every day, so I took a day off work and stayed home to look through her stuff while she slept. Once I was sure she was out, I grabbed her bag, headed to my room, and started digging through it. At first, nothing seemed off with her belongings, but then I reached the bottom and found a smaller bag. I heard clinking inside, and when I pulled it out and opened it, I was stunned to see several wine bottles, some half empty. I'm pretty sure pregnant women aren't supposed to drink, so either she wasn't pregnant at all or she was doing it on purpose, and both ideas were pretty awful. I snapped a bunch of pictures, and when she woke up from her nap, I called her out on it. I was mad as heck because she'd been lying to live here for free and had let her brother down with her dishonesty. I was also ticked off that she'd been dodging chores by using her pregnancy as a shield. When I asked about the bottles, she tried saying she didn't even know they were there, but I wasn't buying that story. For several nights in a row, I heard her up in the room next to mine, stomping around late because she's heavy on her feet, and sometimes I'd hear her singing. I never thought she might be drunk, though. That idea never crossed my mind, and I hadn't snooped before, but finding that wine was the last straw for me. Hey there, folks. Every now and then, I catch the sound of my sister-in-law singing in her room, but it never once crossed my mind that she might be hitting the bottle. That idea just didn't even enter my head, and I'd never poked my nose into her business or asked her about it. But when I found that sack full of wine bottles tucked away with her things, that was the breaking point for me. I'd been putting up with her messy ways and lazy habits for weeks, figuring she needed a break since she was supposed to be pregnant, and I didn't want to be the guy who's rough on a woman in that condition. But she turned that kindness against me, and I couldn't let it slide anymore. So, I told her straight up she had to clear out of my house because I couldn't keep her around after she'd been feeding me lies and leaving me to handle all her chores for weeks without a care for how tough it was on me. She tried to explain that the only reason she made up the pregnancy story was because she knew I'd never let her move and otherwise. Then she opened up about losing her job after the divorce, saying she'd been late too many times and falling behind, so her boss had to let her go. With no money coming in but still needing to pay her lawyer, she figured she'd cut corners by leaving her apartment and moving in with me to save on rent and other costs, since I was the one buying everything and covering all the bills. She admitted she planned to lean on me like a freeloader until her divorce payout came through or she found new work. I was floored that she could even think up something so cold and make me bust my back like a crazy person for weeks just because she was too idle to pitch in. I told her to get out of my home. I was so worked up there was no holding me back, and even though she kept arguing, I lost it, yelling at her and having a meltdown so bad she probably got spooked and left on her own. A couple of hours later, my wife called me, and boy, was he mad that I'd sent Nancy packing. He said I had no business doing that since it was supposed to be a joint decision, seeing as the house belongs to both of us and we split the rent down the middle. But I fired back that it wasn't fair because he wasn't the one stuck doing all the housework while he's away most of the week. I was the one left to tackle everything while Nancy sat around doing nothing, using her so-called pregnancy to dodge her duties. Sure, we split the bills even, but that didn't add up when I was carrying the bulk of the load. I'd go to my job, put in a long day, then come home to a filthy, grimy house and have to scrub it clean and handle all the tasks Nancy wouldn't touch. For some reason, my wife expected me to baby her and put up with her nasty habits. I told him I couldn't share a roof with Nancy because it felt like she grew up in a pigpen and was a complete mess. She showed no regard for the folks she lived with, which was flat out unacceptable, and on top of that, she'd been lying to us for weeks, and I can't figure out why my wife was okay with it. I'd be furious if my own sister pretended to be pregnant to skip work and mooch off me. It's dishonest and downright wrong on a moral level. My wife couldn't come up with a good excuse for her, so instead, he started playing the sympathy card, saying she was having a hard time and his family expected me to look after her instead of being so tough. I get it, and I'd have liked to lend a hand, but if she's going to be selfish and show no respect or care for me, I don't see why I should be nice to her. The only reason I let her stay and did all that work without a peep for the last couple of weeks was because I knew she was struggling, but she turned my worry into a joke by deceiving me, and there was no getting around that. I tried to get through to my wife, but he was dead set and kept saying I was in the wrong, insisting I needed to say sorry to Nancy for being too hard on her and let her come back. That sparked a big fight, and the phone call ended suddenly with no solution in sight. I wasn't about to apologize because I didn't think I'd done anything wrong by asking Nancy to leave. She was rude, had no limits, and made me work twice as hard as I should have had to just because she was too self-centered and lazy to care about others. I don't reckon anyone would want someone like that under their roof. My wife didn't have the full picture to judge because he'd only been home 3 times in the last couple of weeks, always showing up on weekends. Whenever he was around, Nancy would act like a saint, all helpful and innocent. I'd noticed it but figured it was her way of saying thanks, though now I see it was just a show to keep her brother from catching on. It didn't change a thing, though, because even after my wife learned she'd been faking the pregnancy to avoid work, he didn't seem bothered by it. I can see she's his little sister and all, but that doesn't clear her of everything, and he's got responsibilities to me, his spouse. I thought it was unjust for him to demand I apologize to Nancy and take her back after she messed up. Getting cheated on doesn't give her a free ticket to treat everyone else like dirt. That's not how it works, so I figured my wife would see my side and check in with me in a couple of days, but that didn't happen. Instead, my mother-in-law called me the next day after our spat and said I was acting like a terrible person. She accused me of being selfish and needing to think hard about myself because if Nancy felt she had to lie about being pregnant to get my help and a place to stay, there must be something off with me. She said family shouldn't hesitate to ask for support or offer it, but I was the kind of guy who only cared about myself. Nancy had told her mom all about our clash and how tough I was on her before kicking her out, which I thought was totally deserved. But her mother felt I went overboard since Nancy had just been betrayed and I should have gladly let her stay instead of making a fuss. My mother-in-law figured it wasn't a big deal that I was handling all the housework on top of my job, saying thousands of working women everywhere manage home and family daily, and I wasn't anything special for doing it. But here's the kicker, Nancy isn't my family, she's not my wife, and she's not my child, so I've got no reason to take on the extra burden of caring for her. It was out of concern and goodwill that I took her in despite the situation, and she took advantage of that, so I don't believe she earned the right to stay in my house after that. I told my mother-in-law that instead of preaching to me about family duty, she should take her daughter in and teach her some manners. I was pretty irritated that she was trying to paint me as the villain when it was her own daughter lying about being pregnant, which is a serious matter, so we got into a heated argument on the phone, and she said she'd show me a lesson. Then she slammed the phone down, leaving me scratching my head about what she might do next. I ain't too worried about my wife's folks because they've always been pretty decent to me, but we've never had a big falling out like this before, so this is our first real clash. I'm starting to think this might be them showing who they really are. I didn't have a clue what she meant until my wife called me up last night after our earlier argument. I was hoping he'd say sorry and admit he was wrong for taking his sister's side, telling me I did the right thing by asking her to leave since she broke my trust with her lies. But instead, he got on the line and started hollering at me, saying I was out of line for talking to his mom the way I did. He said she was real upset about how I spoke to her during that call, and she told him I didn't belong in the family anymore, even suggesting he should walk away from me before things got worse. I couldn't figure out where that was coming from, because as far as I'm concerned, I just gave her the same attitude she was giving me. You can't talk down to someone and expect them to be all polite, and her being my mother-in-law doesn't give her a free pass. She was acting poorly, and I just gave it right back, so if she's saying I was disrespectful, well, she was just as bad to me. My wife didn't want to hear that, though, and he said things were spiraling out of control, telling me I had to say sorry to his family and do it fast. I thought that was mighty high-handed of him and his folks to expect me to apologize after everything they'd put me through. These last few weeks have been rough on me, having to handle everything myself just because Nancy was too lazy to lift a finger, and they seemed to think she deserved a personal servant and I was supposed to be that guy. I told my wife flat out that I wasn't apologizing to anyone, and when I said that, he told me he'd have no choice but to walk away from our marriage because I was being cold-hearted and he couldn't let me treat his family like that. We've had our share of arguments before, but none as bad as this, and we've never even mentioned divorce, so this is a big deal. I ended the call yesterday after he brought up splitting up because I didn't even know what to say. I still don't think I did anything wrong, but the way everyone's acting is making me wonder if I'm the one in the wrong here and just can't see it. I don't know what to do, and this feels too personal to share with just anyone. I talked to my parents about it, and they think I should let my wife go since it's clear his family means more to him than I do, but they're my folks, so of course they're on my side. So, I'm left wondering if I was wrong for telling my sister-in-law to leave after I found out she'd been lying about being pregnant. A few days have passed since my wife told me he'd file for divorce if I didn't make things right with him and his family. I've thought on it a good while, and I've come to terms with it. I can't change this, it's out of my hands now. If my wife wants to put his family first, even though they're in the wrong, that's his call. I can't for the life of me understand why someone in his position would back his sister over me, and trust me, I've tried. I put myself in his shoes, thinking about what I do, but I can't bring myself to side with Nancy because she's so clearly out of line. She knew full well what she was doing was rotten, making me work my tail off on purpose. She knew I'd come home beat from work, and with us being in a new place where I haven't even unpacked everything, it made things even harder, but that didn't stop her from treating me like a live-in helper, leaving me to do all the chores while she played the pregnancy card to avoid even getting off the sofa. So, excuse me if I don't feel too sorry for her. Me and my wife haven't talked since that last call where he told me his mom wanted him to divorce me, and he seemed to agree with her. It's his decision, and he can do what he wants, I ain't gonna stop him. I'm actually glad he was upfront about considering divorce, because I'd hate to see this side of him after we'd been married longer or had kids. Honestly, I think I dodged a bullet, and I'm thankful for that. I spoke to my parents, and they're putting me in touch with their lawyer. I'm thinking even if my wife doesn't file for divorce, I might just do it myself. I can't see myself going back to a happy marriage with him, pretending everything's fine after all this, because it sure ain't. Him choosing his family over me isn't something I can accept. If I'd been out of line or acting wild, I might have thought it was okay for him to talk about divorce, but I wasn't. They were the ones who messed up, and instead of setting them straight, he's threatening to leave me. There's nothing fair about that, and I don't want any part of it. It was bad enough when he said he'd divorce me just for kicking his sister out after she straight up lied to me. I'm done putting up with this nonsense, so when he gets back this weekend, he can either tell me he's sorry and we can sort this out, or I'm gone. There's no middle ground here. There's a good chance he might not even show up this weekend, like he didn't last time we were fighting, and if that happens, I'll still file for divorce because that'd just mean he's dodging the issue, and this ain't grade school. He can either step up and talk like a grown man, or we're done. It'll be tough, but it's gotta happen. I'm tired of us not talking and giving each other the cold shoulder. It feels childish and pointless. This morning, he came home, which caught me off guard because I didn't think he'd show up, but he did. Problem is, we haven't said a word to each other since he won't take the first step to talk. It's been hours of awkward silence, and we've been steering clear of each other like we're strangers. If I walk into a room, he walks out, and he won't even look me in the eye. I'm gonna talk to him, though, that's for sure, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I might have to call it quits. I can't stay married to a guy who doesn't even think I'm worth a conversation after a fight like this. This is the first time it's happened. Before this, we've only had small disagreements, but if this is how he handles things, I don't want it. It's just plain dumb and immature, and if he doesn't say sorry soon, I don't think I can keep this marriage going. I've lost a lot of respect for him and his family these past few weeks, and this ain't helping one bit. I'm sharing this late at night because my wife just left the house a couple of hours ago. We couldn't work things out, and we both agreed it's best if we go our separate ways. It wasn't a calm talk by any means, there was a lot of yelling, but we finally realized he'll never put his family second, and I'll never put his family first. I was the one who started the conversation this evening. He tried to dodge it, but I laid out everything I'd been thinking about for the past few weeks. He still insisted I was wrong, saying I should have gone easier on his sister since she was under stress from the divorce and her husband's cheating. I told him letting her stay with me was me going easy on her. I was doing everything for her, but she didn't appreciate it, so she had to go. I reminded him he's got responsibilities to me too, since I'm his family now, but he didn't see it that way, and it turned into a loud shouting match. When we both ran out of steam, he said he was leaving because he didn't think we could make it work, and I agreed. It's strange to think this is what broke our marriage, but that's how it goes. I'm gonna talk to my lawyer and file for divorce in a couple of days. It's sad, but I feel like a huge load's been lifted off my chest. I think I'll be okay. Thanks for listening to my story, and I hope y'all will keep me in your prayers.